Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we have a very interesting conversation here with Republican Iowa 3rd District Representative Zach Nunn reportedly considering to run for governor after he initially said a few months ago that he would not be running. Now all expectations are he could potentially be joining this governor's race. So this is very interesting here, not something that you see too often. So the backstory here is that for a while, a lot of Republicans in Iowa were waiting on the Attorney General of Iowa, Brenna Bird, to make a decision for if she was going to run for governor of Iowa in 2026. And with Brenna Bird officially announcing a few days ago, now a few weeks ago, that she would not be running for governor, it opened up the door for other Republicans to jump in this race, including U.S. Representative Zach Nunn, who, as the time I'm recording this, which is Thursday, July 10th, just for reference here, the expectation is she should be entering this race any day now. So this is very interesting, as Nunn previously said he was not going to run for governor. Now with Bird not running, it looks like he's interested in potentially getting into this race. I also saw some reports on X that said Zach Nunn was meeting with representatives at the White House as well. So not only is he looking to enter this race, he could also be looking to get the president's endorsement as well in this Republican primary. And this is very interesting because 3 Republicans are currently running: Eddie Andrews, a state representative, Randy Feenstra, a U.S. representative from the 4th District, and Brad Sherman, former state representative. With State Senator Mike Boussalet, a state senator also forming an exploratory committee, and Bobby Kaufman and Amy Sinclair, both publicly expressing interest. Amy Sinclair, the president of the Iowa Senate, and Bobby Kaufman, a state representative. But without a doubt, Zach Nunn entering this race right now makes it a lot more interesting, seeing as U.S. Representative Randy Feenstra from the 4th District is also currently in this race. So if Zach Nunn were to enter this race, that would mean both the 4th and 3rd District would have their incumbent Republican representatives not running for re-election heading into the 2026 midterms. Now, for the 4th District, Randy Feenstra's district is pretty reliably red, so this wouldn't be too much of a concern. And the Cook PVI map here, the 4th District, for Feenstra is Republican plus 15. That is a safe Republican district. But for Nunn's, it's only Republican plus 2 for the 2025 Cook PVI. So Zach Nunn running for governor in Iowa could be actually a very, very good strategic move for the Democrats at targeting a very close House race. Obviously, Zach Nunn is willing to risk that and try to become the next governor of the state of Iowa. Maybe he thinks he's a better chance at, for sure, if he gets the primary, winning the general election in Iowa for governor than he does winning re-election for the House. It's possible, but it's a very interesting move. On the Democratic side of things, we also know that a handful of Democrats are running, chief among them Rob Sand, the Iowa Auditor of State, the only currently statewide elected Democrat in the state of Iowa, is in this race. He's been touted online by several Democrats and even some independents as a very strong candidate. So he's someone that a lot of people are paying attention to nationwide and seeing what he can do. Cook Political Report has this race listed as lean Republican. Inside Elections has it as a battleground. Sadler Crystal Ball has it as likely Republican. And Race to the White House has it as a toss-up. This is really fascinating. If this Republican primary does end up being Feenstra versus Zach Nunn, then if President Trump decides to make an endorsement in this race, it could be a very, very pivotal and decisive endorsement in this race. It's also worth noting Matthew Whitaker, U.S. Ambassador to NATO and nominee for State Treasurer in 2002, candidate for Senate in 2014, is also a very close President Trump ally as well. He is also listed as a potential candidate. It's not out of the possibility that Nunn jumps in this race without the endorsement of President Trump, and then Matthew Whitaker may decide he wants to run, and then it would be Whitaker versus Feenstra versus Nunn, and then President Trump may throw his support behind Whitaker. Or he may do a co-endorsement like he did in Arizona with Karen Taylor Robson and Andy Biggs, where he has 2 people running that he likes. So this could get very interesting in this Republican primary in Iowa. Whereas on the Democratic side, even though there are 4 Democrats running, we know more likely than not that Rob Sand is likely going to be the Democratic nominee and not have too much of a time in that primary, which does give him the opportunity to fundraise a lot of money, pivot for the general election, and put all of his eggs in that basket. It is also worth noting that Randy Feenstra currently has the endorsement of U.S. Senator Joni Ernst and U.S. Representative Marinette Miller Meeks, both of which are up for election in 2026, and both of them could conceivably maybe be in trouble, Marinette Miller Meeks more so than Joni Ernst, but both of them could conceivably be in trouble in getting reelected in 2026. A bunch of Republicans have also ruled out running. I don't expect any of them going back on their decision to not run for this race. But Zach Nunn potentially running again could get very interesting. As for some recent election results in the state of Iowa in 2022, Kim Reynolds won re-election by 18.5%. Now, her approval ratings are a lot less popular in 2025 and 2026 than they were in 2022. So if she ran for a third term, which she was eligible to do, she would not have won by 18.5%. It would have been a much, much more closer election, possibly even more so along the lines of what we saw in 2018, where Reynolds only won by 2.7%. Now, on the presidential side, Iowa voted for Donald Trump by 13.2%. In 2024, a likely Republican win. 2020 voted for Trump by 8.2%, another likely Republican win. In 2016, 9.4% for Trump, another likely Republican win. On the Senate side of things, very similarly, Chuck Grassley won by 12.2%. In 2022, 2020, Joni Ernst won by 6.5%. So I do fully expect Iowa is going to be more competitive on the governor level, but I do think the Republicans certainly have an advantage going into this race right now. However, my most recent prediction, I did have the race starting out as lean Republican. Now, I did have it being Randy Feenstra versus Rob Sand, but I had it lean Republican, meaning more than 1%, but under 5% margin of victory, because the last time in 2018, where it was a Democratic wave, a Democratic midterm year, the Democrats did very well in Iowa. And I think depending on how President Trump and the Trump administration is doing and being viewed by the American people, it's certainly very possible this race could get very close. It also is dependent on if tariffs and how that's all going come 2026. A state like Iowa is certainly going to get hurt by tariffs a lot more than some other states might. So that could have a very important role on this as well. So Iowa, I'm starting it off right now as lean Republican. As always, these are subject to change as more political information and more data and more candidates entering this race changes. But for right now, I have Iowa starting out as lean Republican and one of the close races to watch for as one of the most possible Democratic flips for 2026. Now, looking at Iowa and its map from 2024, we see a lot of smaller counties here that all voted red, but we also saw some very close counties as well, like Scott County, where Davenport, Iowa is. President Trump won it very narrowly, 51-47 versus Kamala Harris. We also saw some narrow Harris counties as well in Blackhawk County, 50-48.8. Cedar Rapids, Lynn County, this is 54-44 for Harris over Trump. Johnson County, 68-30. Des Moines, Polk County went 55-44 for Harris versus Trump. So for the governor's race, we're looking at these blue areas and looking at what the percentages are. If Davenport, Scott County, this area will likely be going Democrat in 2026 if Rob Sand, the Democrat, is winning this race or overperforming, looking to see Scott County go blue. Another important thing to note is we're probably looking at a lot of these rural red counties here. A lot of these could potentially be in play of going blue in a very good election for the Democrats as well. Just to show you what it looked like, here's what Iowa was in 2024, all these red counties. Let's go back to the last time Iowa went blue, which was 2012. Look how many more blue counties there were when Barack Obama defeated Mitt Romney in the state by about 6%. Like Boone County, Story County, Marshall, Tama, Polk, Jasper, Polishek. You can go up to Buchanan or Fayette, Chickasaw, Floyd, Sarasota, Worth. All these areas going likely Democratic. Now come to 2016, most of them, if not all of them, are either safe or likely Republican. 2024, they're even more safe or likely Republican. So in the governor's race, those areas, if they're going blue on election night, that could be indicating that Rob Sand is performing much better than expected in that governor's race. If the map is resembling what President Trump did in 2024, whoever the Republican is, whether it's Feenstra or Nunn, is likely winning without too much of a problem. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below telling me your thoughts, any questions you have, and any other future races you'd like to see me cover. Also, make sure to hit subscribe as I post several new videos every single day that you're not going to want to miss like this one. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, and former State Senator Republican Brett Lindstrom is officially running for Congress in Nebraska's 2nd District. Lindstrom said his, quote, pragmatic approach and record will speak for itself, as he is the 2nd Republican to officially announce a campaign for the open U.S. House seat. So former Omaha State Senator Brett Lindstrom has officially entered the race to be the Republican nominee to defend the Republican-held 2nd Congressional District. I'm running as a common-sense conservative to protect retirees and fight for working families, focus on the future and national security, Lindstrom said. Lindstrom, who was 44 years old on Monday, became the second Republican to officially join the race. He was long rumored to be one of the GOP candidates to jump in the Republican primary if Representative Don Bacon chose to not run again in 2026. Omaha City Council Vice President Brinker Harding announced her bid last week. Bacon's 2024 GOP primary challenger, Dan Frey, is also reportedly mulling a bid. Lindstrom emphasized that he doesn't really get caught up in who's in the race, but looks forward to people getting to know him and the other candidates and then deciding the best candidate to represent them. Lindstrom said he is a, quote, proven candidate with a proven record of getting things done. The former state lawmaker who represented Northwest Omaha in the Nebraska Capitol from 2015 to 2023 said he has a track record of a pragmatic and common sense approach. Lindstrom, who is known for pushing bills that reduce state income taxes, he also voted to repeal the death penalty in the state, which was reinstated through a ballot measure in 2016. Lindstrom pointed to his role in passing legislation that phased out taxes on Social Security income. He said he wants to bring that to the Hill. President Donald Trump's recently passed Big Beautiful Bill does not provide new temporary tax deductions for Social Security, but it doesn't eliminate the tax on the federal program. Lindstrom, a financial advisor, said that he's been able to meet the challenges the district faced during his time as a state senator, and is looking to continue to do that. He said he wants to bring a different kind of leadership to Washington, an approach focused on real results, not partisan fights, because that's what Nebraska deserves. He was one of the Republican lawmakers in the officially nonpartisan State House to survive the 2018 blue wave. This would be Lindstrom's 5th campaign for elected office. He unsuccessfully ran to be the Republican nominee for governor in 2022. Most of his support during that bid came from the city of Omaha. The 2nd Congressional District is the state's most politically diverse and competitive district and could prove one of the most expensive races in Congress for the 2026 midterms. And now it gets into who's in the race, and I'm going to cover that more in this part of the video. So, for this race here, this is very interesting because the 2nd District, which covers parts of the Omaha metropolitan area, including all of Douglas County, and is home to the city of Omaha, Saunders County, and parts of western Sarpy County, including Gretna and Springfield. The incumbent Republican, Don Bacon, has managed to win re-election several times now in this very close political district, which according to the Cook PVI is listed at Democrat +3. So its recent election history is actually a lean Democratic district. But the Republican Brett Lindstrom is now running to try and keep this race in Republican hands. And just that quick synopsis of him, it sounds like Lindstrom is more in the mold of Don Bacon, a Republican that cares more about issues and policies and not someone that is, say, 100% pro-President Trump or pro the Washington battles and such, where Don Bacon has been outspoken against the president and willingness to do what he believes is right for the district. Brett Lindstrom seems to be in a similar mold to that as Don Bacon would. And for a district like the 2nd District, where Don Bacon has continued to win very narrow elections, having a Republican like Brett Lindstrom like that in this district likely would give the Republicans a better chance in the general election if he would be able to win the primary. However, that's an if, because Brinker Harding, an Omaha City Councilor, is also declared in this race. He also has some notable endorsements, including from U.S. Senator Deb Fischer, U.S. Representative Hal Daub of the 2nd District from 1981 to 1989, the former governor of Nebraska, Dave Heineman, and Kathleen Koth, a state senator from the 31st District. However, Lindstrom does have some endorsements from 3 state senators, Christy Armendariz, Tom Brewer, and Rita Sanders. How this plays out, we'll have to wait and see. It also depends if Dan Frey, the former member of the Nebraska Republican Party and candidate for the district in 2024 and 2014, ultimately ends up entering this race or not. But I would argue that Brett Lindstrom would probably do a better job at competing in this district at the general election side of things. On the Democratic side, it's a wide open primary, but the Democrats are salivating out the opportunity at flipping this district. 4 Democrats are currently running: Evangelos Ariakis, an attorney and perennial candidate; John Kavanaugh, a state senator from the 9th District, and son of former U.S. Representative John J. Kavanaugh III; Mark Johnston, ophthalmologist, and Denise Powell, candidate training group co-founder. Crystal Rhodes, a Douglas County District Court clerk, and former Nebraska Public Service Commissioner, is also publicly expressing interest in this race. Two other Democrats that are mentioned as potential candidates are Keishla Askins, a physician's assistant, and Tony Veland, former Denver Broncos football player. So Veland may have some name recognition in this race, as well as John Kavanaugh, as the son of a former U.S. representative. Two Democrats have officially declined running, including the nominee for the Democrats in 2022 and 2024, Tony Vargas, who has officially endorsed Denise Powell. Kavanaugh has the endorsement of two former U.S. senators from Nebraska, Bob Kerrey, U.S. Senator from Nebraska from 1989 to 2001, and Ben Nelson, U.S. Senator from Nebraska from 2001 to 2013, as well as 8 other state senators. Whereas Denise Powell has the endorsement of Dunixi Goreka, Margot Juarez, and Tony Vargas, as well as a PAC called Poder PAC as well. On the independent side of things, this gives the Democrats a lot more clarity. Megan Hunt, a state senator, is ruled out a bid, as has Dan Osborne, the independent nominee for Senate in 2024, who the Democrats did not run a candidate against in 2024 in the Senate race, hoping to try and help his chances at defeating the Republican. He came very close to doing so. He's running for Senate again in 2026. Now the Democrats have a strong pickup opportunity here in the 2nd District. Cook Political Report and Sabra Crystal Ball both have this race listed as lean Democratic. Inside Elections has it listed as a toss-up. As I mentioned, this district is currently D+3 on the Cook PVI index. So this is very, very big in this district. Now I'm just going to pull up here the House results for Nebraska's 2nd District, which in 2024 was very, very, very close. So this 2nd District ended up voting for Don Bacon over Tony Vargas 50.9% to 49.1%. The largest county in this district by far is Douglas County. This is where the city of Omaha is. Vargas won here 52% to 48% over Bacon, roughly a 10,000 vote net win for Vargas over Bacon in this area. But the other two counties, Sarpy and Saunders, despite not being as large as Douglas, they are way more Republican. So, for instance, Sarpy, which is the 2nd largest of the two, was 66.34%. And despite the population vote size not being anywhere near as big as Douglas, the margin of victory for Bacon at plus 31 netted him about 9,000 votes. And then Saunders, which is about 16,000 votes less than that, its margin of victory being 52%, netted Bacon another 7,000 votes. So when you add those up, it's about 16,000 compared to Douglas County's Vargas's 10,000. It was a roughly 6,000 vote win district-wide for Bacon over Vargas in this area. And if you're a Democrat looking to flip this race, that's what you have to watch for. For one, it wouldn't hurt if you can improve on the margins that Bacon got in Saunders and in Sarpy. Say, for instance, cutting that 31-point victory down to like 25 points and that 52-point victory down to 40 points, that could actually go a very long way for the Democrats in trying to cut down the margin of victory. Instead of maybe 6,000 votes, maybe that's cut down to 3,000 or 2,500. Because then, if the Republican nominee does not do as well as Don Bacon did in Douglas County, where Tony Vargas won 52-48 by roughly 4%, if the Democrat nominee in 2026 can win it by 7 or 8%, then an extra few thousand votes there, plus a few extra thousand votes in Saunders and Sarpy, leads to a very close victory. Now, it should be worth noting here, this is not really impossible for the Democrats. Kamala Harris just won this district of the presidential race by 4.7% against Donald Trump. So it went lean Democratic at the presidential level, but at the House level for Don Bacon, it ended up going as lean Republican. Douglas specifically voted for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump by 10.1%. So for this congressional district, it's pretty simple here. You want to try, if you're a Democrat, you want to try and match the margins in Douglas County that Kamala Harris got, where she won by 10 points. Tony Vargas only won here by 4. It's likely going to be somewhere between that 4-point margin and Harris's 10-point margin for 2026, depending on which Republican wins the primary and how the Democrats are performing in the national congressional vote and how President Trump and his administration is viewed come November of 2026. But it's likely going to be between Democrat plus 4 and Democrat plus 10. The question is it closer to the plus 4 side or the plus 10 side? If Douglas County is going 8 points or more for the Democrats, it's more likely than not the Democrats have enough votes to win back this district. This is what Bacon was able to do in 2024. I'm now going to pull up Nebraska for 2022, where this election wasn't really all too different from what it ended up being in 2024, ended up with Bacon winning 51.3 to Vargas's 48.7. And again, in this one, Douglas County was even more red. It was 51 to 49 for Vargas over Bacon, only roughly 5,000 votes separating Vargas and Bacon in this one. However, it was still only about a 6,000 vote win district-wide for Bacon, as with less voter turnout. In this one, Douglas had 191,000 votes, Sarpy only had 18,000 and a half or so, Saunders only had about 9,000 and a half. So the midterm election vote numbers will probably look more like this one from 2022 than from 2024, but that could also be a good thing for the Democrats, as if they can boost the margins in Douglas County up to that Harris number of Democrat plus 10, that could give the Democrats a much stronger chance at winning this district. I also want to talk about the overall importance of this district, because you're going to be thinking, well, does one House district really matter? And yes, it absolutely does. Right now, with this district as lean Democrat, which is the consensus ranking for 270towin.com, this has Democrats at 206, Republicans 208, with 21 House seats up for grabs. And if you're unfamiliar, the current House party composition right now, Republicans have 220, Democrats have 215. You need 218 House seats to win the majority in the U.S. House. Now, giving the 2nd District of Nebraska to the Democrats, Republicans have 219, Democrats 216. The Democrats, to win back the House in 2026, only need to flip 3 House seats, and winning Nebraska 2nd automatically nets them 1, meaning the Democrats only need 2 more flips to take back House control. So the Democrats can win as many House seats as they can in 2026, but they only technically need to flip 3. And Nebraska 2nd is looking like it's going to be a Democratic flip, unless something really changes in the polling data from now till November of 2026. And you may not even have to go that far to see it. Iowa's 1st District of Marinette Miller Meeks was very close in 2024. That one could flip blue. In a prior video, I talked about Zach Nunn, the Republican in Iowa, potentially running for governor. If he leaves his race vacant and the Democrats have a very good night, that district may be able to flip blue as well. The Democrats could win back the majority in the U.S. House just by winning 1 district in Nebraska and 2 districts in neighboring Iowa. So just 1 House district can make a very big difference in terms of which party will control the House after the 2026 elections. But Brett Lindstrom's officially running in Nebraska's 2nd District, but with Don Bacon running, or not running, it is officially listed as lean Democratic. But I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. Leave a comment below, tell me what you think about this race and this news. Do you think Brett Lindstrom could win this race? Or do you think the Democrats are finally going to flip this district after a few years of Republican wins by Don Bacon in this district? Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment below with any other thoughts or future video ideas you'd like to see me cover. And again, thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about the 2026 Georgia Senate race, where another Republican representative, Mike Collins, is reportedly teasing a Georgia Senate bid. The 2-term Republican congressman says the Democrat Ossoff must go, as the GOP targets the seat as one of their top flip opportunities in 2026. Republicans are salivating at the chance to flip the seat, and Collins, in a video first obtained by Fox News Digital, contended that Ossoff must go. He said, quote, "It was never in my plans to run for the U.S. Senate. I love what I'm doing now. I think I've been effective for my district, the state. I love my district. I mean, just good, solid, hardworking people," he continued. "But I also understand that sometimes you don't do what you want to do, but what you need to do." Collins, a 2-term lawmaker representing Georgia's 10th district, still didn't directly say that he was jumping into the race, and noted that he would first consult with his family and President Donald Trump to determine where we can be best beneficial to help in the mission to make sure we get a Republican in the U.S. Senate from Georgia. The lawmaker became a staple on the road during Trump's campaign last year, and his bill, the Lake and Riley Act, was first signed into law by the president during his 2nd term. Collins argued that Ossoff doesn't represent the Georgia values that I cherish so much, and noted that Republicans have largely dominated the state in recent elections, including Trump's victory in November. Still, Ossoff, who's seeking re-election for a 2nd term, was the first Democrat to win a Senate seat in the Peach State in roughly 2 decades. Devin Cruz, a spokesperson for the Democratic Party of Georgia, said in a statement to Fox News Digital that Immediately after voting to rip away health insurance from 750,000 Georgians, Representative Collins now wants Georgians to give him a promotion. Cruz continued Collins would just join a crowded, messy primary that will leave the GOP nominee badly bruised, while Senator Ossoff is building massive momentum to take on whichever Donald Trump loyalist limps over the finish line. Senate Republicans now view Ossoff's seat as one of the most viable flip opportunities in the upcoming 2026 midterm cycle, when the GOP hopes to keep and expand upon its thin majority in the upper chamber. Should Collins dive all the way into the race, he will go face-to-face against fellow Georgia Republican Buddy Carter and Georgia Insurance Commissioner John King in the Republican primary. Carter was the first Republican to jump into the contest after Georgia Republican Governor Brian Kemp, who was heavily considered a heavy favorite to run against Ossoff, opted to forgo a Senate bid. Now I'm going to get into more of the other candidates running right here. But this race is going to be very, very close. Obviously, Jon Ossoff won a very close election back in 2020, which I'll also be getting to in just one moment. He won a very close race, and the Republicans are hoping to target this race and flip it back to the Republican side, but that's going to be a lot easier said than done. Ossoff is building quite a formidable war chest for this campaign. As of March 31st, 2025, Jon Ossoff has raised roughly $31.9 million, including having a little bit over $11 million cash on hand. So Ossoff is preparing for a very tough general election. On the Republican side of things, with Brian Kemp not running, the Republicans are scrambling to find a Republican candidate they can unite around to face off against Ossoff. Because if they have a very messy Republican primary, like the article said with the Democratic spokesperson, that actually could hurt the Republican candidates and having to invest all that money, time, and effort into going after each other instead of Jon Ossoff. That gives Ossoff a better chance at winning. That's how electoral politics and primary politics often works. Right now, Reagan Boggs, a horse trainer, is running in the race, as well as Buddy Carter, U.S. Representative from the 1st District, and John King, Georgia Insurance Commissioner. For the Republicans, Christoph Chapman, Christina Clement, Rick Temple, and Vincent Watkins have all filed paperwork to run, but in all likelihood, given they have very low name recognition, they're probably not going to become the Republican nominee for Senate. State Senator Colton Moore from the 53rd District has formed an exploratory committee to run, and then some big names are still considering running as well, like Rick Allen, U.S. Representative from the 12th District, now Mike Collins, U.S. Representative from the 10th District, Derek Dooley, the former head coach of the Tennessee Volunteers football team, Tyler Harper, Georgia Agriculture Commissioner, and Rich McCormick, U.S. Representative from Georgia's 7th District. A handful of Republicans are also reportedly listed as potential candidates. They have not given an indication if they are leaning one way or the other for this race. Doug Collins, U.S. Secretary of Veteran Affairs and U.S. Representative from the 9th District and candidate for Senate in 2020. Greg Dolezal, state senator. Also should be worth noting, Doug Collins, a very close ally of President Trump. Brian Jack, U.S. Representative from Georgia's 3rd District. Kelly Loeffler, former U.S. Senator from Georgia and Administrator of Small Business Administration in the Trump administration, another very close ally of the president. And Brad Raffensperger, Georgia Secretary of State, certainly not a very close ally of the president, more so close ally of Governor Brian Kemp. Case in point right now, it's very possible Mike Collins could become the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate in Georgia. The Republican primary at this point in time is still very wide open. And if an endorsement is given here by President Trump or Governor Brian Kemp or both in this race, it may pay significant dividends, as this race is certainly very wide open on the Republican side. Right now, the only hypothetical polling that's been done so far was back in April, which included Marjorie Taylor Greene in that poll, but there was one part of the poll where it did not, and that showed that Mike Collins led over the rest of the field, Collins getting 46%, Buddy Carter in second with 23%, Rich McCormick in third with 21%, and then John King in fourth with 11%. Now, the other poll, which did include Marjorie Taylor Greene, who already ruled out running, so she will not be running in this race, but it did show that in second place, Brad Raffensperger had 22%, Mike Collins then had third place at 15%, Buddy Carter fourth place with 13%, Rich McCormick 5%, John King 2%. So Brad Raffensperger entering this race could play a very significant role as well. But without him in the race and without Marjorie Taylor Greene in this race, this poll showed that Mike Collins had a lead over the rest of the Republican primary field. If he officially enters the race, will that continue or will that change? We'll have to wait and see. But Mike Collins entering this race does represent one of the more, I would say, according to the poll, one of the more potential notable Republicans that could become the nominee. But even still, if Mike Collins were to enter this race, this is going to be a very tough race for the Republicans to win. Inside Elections, Cook Political Report, Saba Crystal Ball all have this race listed as a toss-up. Race to the White House has it listed as lean Democratic. It should also be worth noting that an independent candidate, Albert Al Bartel, a businessman, Air Force veteran, no labels national delegate, and independent candidate for U.S. Senate in 2020, is also in this race. Georgia has a rule where the winning candidate must break 50% of the vote to be declared the winner on election night. If not, the top two vote getters will advance to a runoff election. Usually it's in early January, and then they'll face off in a head-to-head where the winner has to break 50%. So a third-party candidate in this race could play a very important role in setting this race to a runoff if the election is too close. Right now, the only candidates that are officially running for Ossoff versus Buddy Carter and Ossoff versus Strong King, they're very early polls. All 3 out of the 4 polls in the Ossoff versus King matchups have been Republican-affiliated polls. For Ossoff versus Carter, 4 of them have been Republican-affiliated polls. But in all cases, Jon Ossoff is leading over the Republican candidates in both of these polls. It should be worth noting that there is large amounts of undecided vote in these polls with 9, 12, 13, 23% respectively, but Jon Ossoff, as the incumbent U.S. Senator, has high name recognition and is starting out with the early lead over these polls, and quite frankly, I fully expect him to do so. Though it is interesting that against Buddy Carter, Ossoff's usually around 46, 47%, except for one signal poll where he's at 49%, whereas against King, he's already breaking 50% in 2 polls. It's going to be very tough to beat Ossoff if he's starting off in the high 40s, but if he's starting at 50 or better, the chances of beating him are almost near 0. Now for some other candidates, Jon Ossoff versus Brad Raffensperger seems to be the most competitive in a lot of these recent early polls. That signal poll from Maine showed Ossoff and Raffensperger tied at 44 to 44, but again in the 3 other polls it showed the same problem for the Republicans, where Ossoff is starting out with a much higher floor, as he's the person that people in Georgia have likely heard of. Trafalgar has Ossoff 46-38, Atlanta Journal 48-39, WPA 46-32. Ossoff and Kemp, no point talking about that as Brian Kemp's not running. Marjorie Taylor Greene, same thing. Ossoff versus Mike Collins. This is shown to be one of the more competitive matchups thus far in this potential matchup here. For that signal poll in May, Ossoff only leads over Collins 46 to 43%. That is one of the more closer matchups we've seen, 11% of the vote still undecided, and 3.4% margin of error here. So if you look at it in favor of the Republicans, you could say Mike Collins is statistically tied with Jon Ossoff in this race. Now, of course, the margin of error can also go both ways. That could also say Jon Ossoff is not up by 3, he's really up by 6 points, but you can look at it both ways depending on which political side you want to view it on. But case in point being, of these early polls that have been taken, Mike Collins seems to have a higher floor of support than a lot of the other Republican candidates, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and even Brad Raffensperger in some regard. Mike Collins starts out with a higher floor of support. But you could also say the same for Jon Ossoff in these margins, where against Raffensperger, Ossoff had 44%, Trafalgar had 46%, Atlanta Journal he had 48%. Ossoff versus Collins starts out with 46, 48, and 44 from back in January. So Ossoff is going to start out with a high floor of support, really no matter what, around 47, 48, 49%. The question is, can the Republicans put up a candidate strong enough to try and cut into those margins with Ossoff and maybe win a very close election that in all likelihood will probably require a runoff to defeat the Democratic incumbent. Right now it remains to be seen if that will be the case, but in the early polling data, Mike Collins seems to be one of the more stronger Republican polling candidates at this point in time. A big help for the Republicans in this race would be if President Trump and Governor Brian Kemp decide to both endorse a singular candidate. For instance, if they both rallied behind Mike Collins, endorsed him, and essentially tried to clear the primary for Collins, that could go a long way in trying to help this race get a lot more competitive. But this is going to be a close race, really no matter what. We saw Georgia go for President Trump in 2024 by 2.2%, a very, very close race, after Joe Biden won it in 2020 by 0.24%. But the Senate races in 2022, Herschel Walker lost to Raphael Warnock, the Democratic incumbent, by 2.8% in that runoff election. And just to show you in the first round of voting, again, neither Ossoff nor Warnock, neither Warnock or Walker, were able to break 50%. Warnock got 49.44%. Walker got 48.49%. So 2 Senate elections in a row now neither candidate has broken 50% in the first ballot, so it's possible Ossoff or Collins could, but I would bet it's more likely we see a runoff election in 2026 once again for Georgia. But then they did the runoff, and then we saw Raphael Warnock, get 1.8 million votes or so. Herschel Walker get 1.7. Warnock, from the first election to the runoff, only lost about 120,000 or 125,000 votes or so, where Walker lost closer to 200,000 votes on that. So voter turnout in the runoff is also a very important factor. Back in 2020, we also saw Warnock win the special election versus Kelly Loeffler by 2.1%. Ossoff also defeated Republican incumbent David Perdue in 2020 to win the Senate seat. And this is very, very interesting because many people may not remember this because it seems so long ago now, but on the first round of voting, David Perdue actually defeated Jon Ossoff. David Perdue got 49.73%. Ossoff only got 47.95%. So from that standpoint, you could look at it saying, well, Ossoff technically lost to Perdue on election night for 2020. But again, Georgia's election laws are very important to note because neither candidate broke 50% of the vote. Third-party candidate likely stopped Perdue from reaching 50%, had to go to a runoff. And this was after everything that was happening with the 2020 election with the state of Georgia. A lot of Republican voters didn't want to get out and vote again. They felt their vote didn't count. Democrats were really energized to get out and vote to give the Democrats a Senate majority, and they did that. Ossoff, from November to the runoff election, lost roughly 100,000 votes. David Perdue, tell me if you heard this before, lost over about 200,000 votes. The Republican turnout in these runoff elections in 2020 and 2022 were not as high as the Democrats, who were very motivated to get out to vote for Ossoff and Warnock in 2020 and for Warnock again in 2022. So for 2026, if the Republicans want to try and win this Senate race, a big thing they're going to have to do is they could try to outright beat Jon Ossoff on November's election day in 2026, but I think it's going to be more likely they would beat him in the runoff because Ossoff, as the Democratic incumbent this time around, Ossoff got almost 48% going up against a Republican incumbent. This time, he's the Democratic incumbent. He's got the Democratic money in the war chest to help him out. Defeating Ossoff without a runoff is going to be very tough for the Republicans. Doable, yes, but very, very tough. So Republicans will likely need a runoff to do so. And all eyes for Georgia are going to be watching on these very important areas right here surrounding Atlanta and Fulton County. These suburban areas, Cobb County, Douglas County, Clayton, Henry, Rockdale, Gwinnett, Forsyth, Cherokee, these are areas that have been shifting a lot to the Democratic direction in recent elections. These are the reasons why Georgia, which was for Mitt Romney in 2012 an 8-point win, went down to Donald Trump in 2016 a 5-point win, and then a Joe Biden 0.24% win in 2020, and only a Trump plus 2.2 in 2024. The surrounding Atlanta metro area has shifted a lot to the Democratic direction, and it's going to be a key area to watch for in 2026 if the Democrats and Jon Ossoff want to hold on to the Senate race, or if the Republicans want to win it back, they need to try and replicate the map that President Trump was able to do in 2024. After my most recent Senate prediction for the state of Georgia, Georgia is one of the 3 Senate races I do have as a toss-up, or I have no rating. Right now, at this point in time, I do predict that this election will go to a runoff election, and when everything is said and done, I do think that Jon Ossoff will nearly win this race by more than 1%, but under 5%, rightly around a 2% victory at this time, making it a lean Democratic win at this time. Mike Collins, being the Republican nominee, if he were to enter, does potentially make this race a little bit more competitive, but I do think Jon Ossoff is building up an impressive war chest, and seeing as 2026 is supposed to be a more Democratic-friendly year, I think this gives Ossoff a pretty strong chance at winning re-election and winning this race. Now, I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think is going to happen in the Senate race. Do you think Mike Collins will run? And if he does, do you think he'd be a good candidate to face up against Ossoff? Leave your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video.